Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Nerdy Multiverse and yet another breakdown. Today we will be breaking down Season 3, Episode 6 of The Mandalorian, in other words being Chapter 22 of the series and seemingly an ill-timed side quest sort of mission, and this episode is titled Guns for Hire. The episode starts off as a ship that is filled with Quarrens flies through space where they are then informed of an Imperial ship in the vicinity, so they try to make contact with the ship to see if they need to pay an Imperial warlord for passage or if they could hire the ship's protection. But it turns out that the Imperial ship that is following them is actually Moff Gideon's old cruiser ship, which has now been taken over and is being used by the Mandalorians. And this is because of the events of Season 2 of the series. After they defeated Moff Gideon and he got arrested, Bo and her Mandalorians had a deal that they could take his ships to be a part of her fleet. However, after Bo did not regain ownership of the Dark Saber as Din defeated Moff Gideon and not her forces basically abandoned her, and now Axe Woves is leading these Mandalorians here, and Axe is one of the Mandalorians that was with Bo when she first showed up in the show back in Season 2, with Koska Reeves as well, who we also see here. Axe tells the Quarren leader that they have actually been sent to track down their ship as they are harboring a Mon Calamari prince, as we see that the Quarren leader and the Mon Calamari prince have fallen in love, and it's not looked at very lightly, and a certain Mon Calamari senator or prime minister has requested for the return of their son, which is why the Mandalorians are now after them. Now, the reason that this is not looked at very lightly is because the two species of the Quarrens and the Mon Calamari have been at war and major conflict for many, many years. The two species practically have hated each other forever, sort of like the conflict that we see between Wookiees and Trandoshans, and we have also seen this conflict in the Clone Wars. Axe sends Koska Reeves and a few others to board the Quarren ship and retrieve the prince, in which they do, where we then cut to Bo Katan and Mando flying into a planet known as Plazir 15 on board of Bo's Gauntlet starfighter, as they have tracked down the Mandalorian fleet to this planet, as Bo is seeking out remaining exiled Mandalorians to join forces with the ones that are on Navarro 7 so that they can band together and retake their home of Mandalore. They land on the planet after being forcefully flown and docked into a docking bay where they are greeted by some reprogrammed Imperial droids as they board a transport shuttle that ends up taking them to the inner city, as the planet's leaders wish to speak with the two before they can go and seek out Axe Woves and the Mandalorian fleet. And as they walk in to meet with the leaders, we see that the Duchess and her husband, Captain Bombardier, are actually none other than Lizzo and Jack Black. Long story short, they are willing to allow Bo and Din to go meet with the Mandalorian fleet that they have hired for protection, but they need their help first as they are facing a droid malfunctioning issue, and it has gotten to the point where some of the droids that are malfunctioning have attacked the innocent civilians of Plazir 15. So Bo and Mando end up agreeing to help them out with the droid issue, where we cut to them meeting with the head of security, Commissioner Hellgate, who is played by none other than Christopher Lloyd, of course the man who played Doc Brown in Back to the Future. And he shows the two some examples of the droid malfunctions. He tells them that if they want to get the locations of the suspected droids that may cause some issues in the future, they need to head down to the lower levels to speak with the Ugnaughts, and so they head down to meet with them. When they arrive down in the lower levels and Bo tries to get the attention of the Ugnaughts, to no avail, we see them all working on different droids, such as a super battle droid. Since Bo was not able to gain their attention, Din takes it into his own hands and speaks to them the way that you are supposed to actually communicate with them, as he tells them that he was friends with Kuel, the Ugnaught that helped Mando out in the first season, of course, and he finishes his statement, of course, by saying, "I have spoken," which causes them to listen and agree to sit down and speak with them. After some conversation with the Ugnaughts and showing respect to how hard they work and how respectable their work on droids is and how unparalleled it is to the entire galaxy to anyone else's work and how they are the hardest working species in the galaxy, they end up coming around and giving them the locations of droids that they suspect artifact will end up malfunctioning soon, which leads Bo and Mando to the docking bays. The docking bay is filled with super battle droids, and they are being overlooked by a B1 battle droid, so as Bo speaks to the B1 battle droid, Din waves his hands in front of the passing supers, and then begins kicking them over to see if any of them will end up reacting to him, much like how Del Spooner did to the robots in iRobot. After kicking over a few of these supers, one ends up reacting to him and getting back up to backhand Mando right in the head, which sends him flying, and the droid begins to run away as Bo and Mando are forced to chase after it before it causes any harm to the people of Plazir 15. The super runs and moves around much more agile and faster than we have seen one move in the Clone Wars and in the prequels, and after getting some things thrown at them and chasing the super down for some time, they end up catching it and taking it down. Bo looks through the droid and ends up finding out that the droid was in possession of a spark pad that reads off an address and the name The Resistor, which leads the two to a droid bar that we see is filled with different droids, of course, such as B1 battle droids, protocol droids, and R2 units. They walk up to the bartender droid and begin questioning it on the spark pad, but the droid points out that they hand out tons of spark pads to droids, so it really doesn't mean anything. Din gets sick of taking things easy and threatens the droid, which leads to it agreeing to helping the two out, as the droids on this planet and in the bar are all concerned that they will end up being replaced by humans if the malfunctions continue. After speaking with the bartender droid, they find out that all of the droids that are malfunctioning were given the same exact batch of Nepenthe, and Nepenthe is basically just a lubricant that is used to protect against mechanical wear while also delivering program patches to the droids. After finding this out, Bo and Mando head to the droid morgue, I guess you could call it, to examine the remains of the last malfunctioning battle droid, where they extract its Nepenthe to examine it, which is where the medical droid in the room ends up malfunctioning itself and going rogue, shooting its lasers around the room, nearly cutting down everyone in it before Mando ignites the Dark Saber and cuts it down. And it's still very obvious that Mando cannot wield the blade properly, and it's still extremely heavy for him. After dealing with the rogue medical droid, they look over the Nepenthe and discover that there are actually nano droids that also have a hidden chain code inside of it, which they look at and determine that these were originally created by the Techno Union. Now, if you did not already know, the Techno Union were a big part of the Separatist Alliance during the Clone Wars and were basically responsible for most of the droid army that were used by the Separatists. And the Techno Union was led by Wat Tambor, who was one of the last standing Separatist leaders on Mustafar when Anakin went there to cut them all down by the order of Palpatine. They end up discovering that these nanodroids were actually ordered by their head of security, Commissioner Hellgate, meaning he was behind all of this the entire time, which leads Bo and Mando back to the security offices to confront Hellgate, where he immediately gets up and threatens to push the big red button that was not actually a switch to shut off all of the droids, but it was actually a switch to turn them all back into battle droids and make them turn on the planet and its people. It's revealed that Commissioner Hellgate is a separatist himself, but more importantly, a Count Dooku loyalist. Pretty interesting to see that people around the galaxy are still loyal to Dooku and the separatists, even after such a long time. Bo ends up tasing him and they arrest him and take him back up to Jack Black and Lizzo, and by the way, that sounds pretty weird to say, but anyways, they inform them of his betrayal, and Hellgate seems pretty hostile towards Captain Bombardier, but very apologetic towards the Duchess. In the end, he ends up apologizing to the Duchess, but is sent into exile anyways. As a thank you to Bo and Mando, the Duchess gives them the key to Plazir 15, and they promise that they will always be welcome on this planet. It looks like the people of Mandalore are gathering more allies. First, Navarro 7, and now Plazir 15. The Duchess also decides to knight Grogu, which you could sort of see as his way of being knighted as a Jedi as well. They're sent on their way and they head towards the Mandalorian fleet, where we can definitely see that Bo is a bit worried and nervous about how she will be greeted by her former people. Arriving at the Mandalorian fleet, the two get a bunch of stares, and Bo claims that she is back to reclaim her fleet. However, Axe says that it's his fleet now, as he is in leadership and he has grown quite fond of it. So Bo decides to challenge him, one warrior to another, to a trial by combat, just like how Darth Maul challenged Pre Vizsla in the Clone Wars. The two get into a pretty intense battle using their different Mandalorian weapons and tools, like their vibro blades and flamethrowers, and in the end, Bo reigns victorious and yields Axe Woves. After losing the trial by combat, Axe makes a remark that Bo should actually be challenging Din to combat as he has the Dark Saber. And of course, whoever wields that is technically the one who should be leading Mandalore and its people. Bo gets up after winning the trial by combat and tries to speak to the Mandalorians in a sort of victory speech, and she tells them that all of the Mandalorians are stronger together. And Axe again makes a remark about Din and says Mando is just a zealot and he doesn't have a single drop of Mandalorian blood in him, so in Axe's eyes, Mando is unworthy. So Bo defends him and says that he has also taken the creed himself, just like their ancestors, so he is any bit of Mandalorian that anybody else here is. Axe doubles down again about how Mando has the Dark Saber and Bo does not. So Mando speaks up himself and says that the saber will be hers, telling them that according to their ways and their rules, she does rightfully own it, as when he went to Mandalore, he was beaten by the wannabe General Grievous, who then was defeated by Bo Katan. So technically, this makes the Dark Saber rightfully belong to Bo. Eventually, Axe does come around and admits that yes, it does technically belong to Bo now, as Din hands it to her and she then stands in front of all of the Mandalorians there, who we can assume now have accepted her as their leader again, as she finally wields the Dark Saber again after many years of not rightfully owning it. She ignites it, and this is where the episode ends off. Now, I thought that this episode was okay. It had some fun stuff in there, like the bit of action that we got and seeing the different appearances or cameos, as well as seeing the battle droids again, giving that sort of Clone Wars feel. But other than that, I am a bit worried about this season. There's now only 2 episodes left in this season, which by the way, we waited for practically 2 whole years, and we basically just got another sort of side quest episode, which didn't do too much for the story up until the very end. Now, this season has been good so far, but also it has had a completely different sort of feel to it in my opinion, compared to the previous 2 seasons. There hasn't really been a set storyline or antagonist or anything like that, like there has been in the last 2 seasons with Moff Gideon and all of that sort of stuff. I'm hoping that the last 2 episodes of the season are a bit longer than the other ones and they really pick things up so that we can end the season off strongly. But other than all of that, overall the episode was a decent entry for the series, and I will say that it was still on the entertaining sort of side. But of course, I would like to hear about your thoughts on this episode as well, so make sure to leave them down below. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed our breakdown on this episode, don't forget to give it a like, and with that being said, we will see you all the next time that we go through and explore the nerdy multiverse.